So today I'm going to read to you the Declaration of Independence and an excerpt from The Crisis, which is by a guy named Thomas Paine. There's a lot of reckoning right now in 2020 about who we are as a nation and the founding of this nation and the founding fathers and what kind of people they were and should they be revered, should they be canceled. And there's a lot of different opinions on it. I'm going to give you my complicated opinion and then you decide for yourself what you take and what you leave. I'm not talking about Confederate monuments or the Confederate flag, by the way. Those, in my opinion, should absolutely be canceled. There's no room for argument on that one for me. Those men fought to preserve slavery. They were traitors against the United States. And maybe most importantly, they're losers. Why do we have monuments to losers? Yes, the history, if you say, oh, don't tear it down because it's history, fine. History belongs in a museum, not on a public square on top of a horse for everyone to say, yeah, those guys fought the good fight. Too bad they lost. Man, slavery would have been cool. No patience for Confederate monuments. But there are some people that would go and say, look, we got to re-examine George Washington. He owned slaves. True. We got to examine Thomas Jefferson. He owned slaves. Also true. And maybe we rename those monuments or take those down. And there's an obvious pushback. We're like, wow, the Washington Monument? You're going to take down the Washington Monument? It's in Spider-Man. You can't do that. First of all, I would say that those that argue, well, it was just that time, and so everyone owned slaves, and so it wasn't really evil, so to speak. It was just the time, and you would have owned slaves if you lived in that time. That's both true and yet not. Yeah, it was certainly a lot more accepted, but there were lots of people who were abolitionists who said owning slaves was wrong. Slavery should be abolished. It shouldn't exist. Guess who two of those people were? George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. They both spoke against slavery while owning slaves themselves. They both saw it as not a long-term solution for the country. Jefferson in particular basically predicted the Civil War and said if we continue with this process of importing and breeding slaves and keeping it will divide us as a country, and he was right. And yet the man owned 600 slaves. And unlike Washington, he didn't even free them when he died. And furthermore, and I think this is why Jefferson is a great metaphor for the country in general, Jefferson had an affair with, and some would say, and they're probably right, would call it rape, a slave of his named Sally Hemings, and had multiple children by her. And when slaves have children, guess what? Those children are slaves. So Jefferson owned his own children as slaves, and yet came out again and again and talked about these principles about freedom and liberty, and even said we should get rid of slavery. Still thought the black race was subservient to the white race, but thought they were good enough to have children with. So it's complicated. My point is, out of all this, I guess, is that at least, the founding fathers, Jefferson, Washington, the other guys who owned slaves, at least they moved the ball forward. They had these ideals. They talked the good talk. They said we should be looking at these freedoms from monarchy and tyranny. They just didn't see it all the time in themselves and their own hypocrisies, which they certainly had. So that's my thought, that we learn about these guys, we keep the monuments, but we add addendums. Hey, but this is the whole story of who these guys were. They weren't gods. They didn't have it all figured out. They were hypocrites in many senses and ways. There's my initial spiel on the whole monuments and canceling and whatever. So page 156 in your lit book. This is the entire Declaration of Independence as they've written here. It's not a very long document. I'm still going to skip parts of it because parts they get a little boring and don't apply. I am going to hit every part that's going to be on the little 20 question test at the end. So you want to pay attention and listen. And as I skip around, you'll follow me in the book. Okay, so I'll tell you where I'm skipping from and to. So Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. Background. In 1776, Jefferson was chosen with Franklin, Adams, and others to write a declaration of the colony's independence. The draft presented to the Second Continental Congress was largely Jefferson's work, so he gets credit. To his disappointment, however, Congress made changes before approving the document. They dropped Jefferson's condemnation of the British for tolerating a corrupt parliament, and they struck out a strong statement against slavery. That's right. Thomas Jefferson wanted to put an argument against slavery in the Declaration of Independence. The guy who owned 600 slaves, including his own children. And the Southern guys said, no, that'll never wash. Like, we need a unified thing, and there's just too much slavery to get rid of it. So again, Jefferson had good ideas. He just didn't quite get there with it and didn't quite follow. He was willing to give his up, but it didn't happen. All right. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Plain English, I know that's a lot of words. He basically says, Declaration of Independence is a breakup letter. It's not a law. It's not the Constitution. It just says, here's the reasons why we want to split up with you, Great Britain. And he's saying, when this happens, when people who've been governed by another people want to leave, they have to give reasons why they want to leave. And so that's what he's going to do. From a writer's perspective, it's very good. It's his intro paragraph. Okay, he's stating his thesis. All right, here's his actual thesis in the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That means everyone, this is obvious to everyone. That all men are created equal, except slaves and definitely not women. See the hypocrisy? That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter, to change it, or to abolish it, means get rid of it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, which means unlawful seizures of rights or privileges, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, which means tyranny, like just telling us what to do, we can't do anything about it. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And that long paragraph kind of ends the intro, the argument for what he's trying to say here. And to sum up that paragraph, there's a couple questions on the test about this. He's saying you shouldn't change or abolish your government for light transitory things like the new tax code. That shouldn't, like little things like that, the state flower, whatever, that shouldn't bother you. Okay, you don't change everything up because of minor little things. But he's saying in this case, there's a long history of major things that we've been complaining about for a long time, and nothing gets done. And they're trampling our basic rights that should be obvious to everyone, and yet don't seem obvious to the guy in charge, the King of England. So when that happens, it's the duty of the people. They have to change their government or just get rid of it. Getting rid of it is the absolute last resort, and only after a really long history should you be able to do that. But that's what he's saying has happened here. He's like, that's the case here. We need to get rid of this. Shouldn't be the first thing that you do, should be the last thing that you do, but we can't wait this out anymore. It's been too long, and too much bad stuff has happened. Okay? So then he starts his body paragraph, so to speak, of giving the reasons why, the evidence for what he's saying. Okay, he's not just saying, hey, it's bad. He's going to give you all the reasons why it's bad. So here it is. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. So complaint number one is he doesn't sign off on laws that we pass that we think would be better for us. Complaint two, he has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent, like his permission, be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. So the second paragraph is basically an extension of the first. He doesn't sign off on the laws that we're passing. He neglects us. He ignores us. Now I'm going to skip, because again, there's a lot of complaints here. Skip to the last paragraph on 157. So at bottom of the page, where it starts. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Like you had to quarter British troops in your home. That was a law. Top of page 158. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. So the troops answer to nobody. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, given his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. That was a reference to the Boston Massacre. If you think, yeah, does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's the Boston Massacre he's talking about there. By the way, first man killed in the Boston Massacre, Crispus Attucks, African-American, one of the first kind of black martyrs of American history. for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. He's talking about Canada now and how they took over that place. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. So back to that complaint. He gets to pass the laws, he says what goes, and nothing we do, there's no democracy, we have no say in the rules and laws and procedures that govern us. Skip again to the third paragraph from the bottom of 158, starts in every stage. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. Redress means compensate us for the wrong that has been done. In the most humble terms. We've been nice about it. Our repeated petitions, our repeated asks for make this right, have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration, like why we came, and our settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, which means the ability to rise above pettiness or meanness. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity, means kinship, a sense of family. We must therefore acquiesce, which means to give up, in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. That paragraph's kind of nasty. He's basically saying, look, if you're back in England, even if you're related to us, you're our fathers, uncles, grandparents that we left behind back there, we've tried to tell you what's going on here and how it's not cool, and you guys should be standing up for us, and you haven't listened. So if we go to war, we're fighting against you too. Doesn't matter if we're actual family or friends or whatever. It's over once the shooting starts. All right. Second to last paragraph, page 159. We therefore, here's his conclusion. All right, sum it up. Conclusion paragraph. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Then they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. So he's finishing up with, here in summation, here's what this means. My breakup letter to you is, we're our own country. We get to do everything own countries do. Make armies, make our own money, do trade, pass laws. We're gone from you. You had your chance later. All right. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, the whole God is on our side argument, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that's the Declaration of Independence, mostly by Thomas Jefferson. All right, turning the page to 160. This is from a larger work called The Crisis. So it's all well and good to break up with Great Britain and say, we're done with you. Well, Great Britain wasn't like, all right, you guys go. Like, I'll date someone else. No, Great Britain was very much not into that idea. Hamilton has a great song about this, You'll Be Back, by King George. And there was a war. You might have heard of it. The Revolutionary War took place to get rid of, to separate from Great Britain. And contrary to what I think a lot of Americans think, it wasn't like, oh yeah, we had the militias and we had the guerrilla tactics and they were all marching in big dumb red lines, so we just picked them off and we won pretty easily. No, it was not easy. It was very difficult, and we got our asses kicked for the first 2.5 years or so. They had far superior forces, especially naval forces, and it was a very tough slog. And the winter comes in, I believe it's 1778 is when he writes this, and people are wanting to give up. It might be 1779. Anyway, check me on that. People want to give up. A lot of people are just like, dude, we don't have clothes. The winter's here. We don't have food. We're eating like animals, like dogs and stuff like that. And Washington's forces are trapped. And so Thomas Paine this patriot comes along and says, you know what? Screw all that. We're not giving up. Everything that's hard, anything that's worth doing, anything that gets you something amazing like freedom, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. We should have expected this. We knew it was going to be hard. And that's what's going to make everything worth it. I compare this speech to like a coach's speech at halftime when the football or the basketball, whatever team is getting its asses kicked, just getting their asses handed to them. And he goes in and says, "Did you guys think this would be easy? This is not easy. Right now is the time to sack up, to gut up, to nut up, whatever phrase you want to use, and get out there and fight through this. And when we do come back and when we do win, it'll feel so much better than if we just rolled these guys from the beginning, because it will have been hard. There will have been sacrifices made, and it will have been worth it." So that's what he's trying to do here, is fire up the troops with his pen. And by the way, Thomas Paine never owned a slave, was even a bit of an abolitionist. So this guy you could feel good about and build statues to with no, I don't know what maybe else in his personal life he did wrong, but as far as we know about that, he never owned slaves, so he doesn't have to get canceled. He's on the right side of history. So this is from The Crisis, #1, and it's a fire-up speech, man. If you like sports, think of that while you're reading this. This is a great halftime locker room speech. Starts off with a great line. "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman." I know there's a question on the test about this. Summer soldier and sunshine patriot. You know what he's saying? Bandwagoners. Fair weather fans. People who only root for the team when they're going well. When they're going to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the NBA championship, whatever sport you're into. You know what he's talking about. You maybe are one of these people. You only wear the gear. You only show up and get vocal when your team's doing well. When they suck, I don't even like them anyway. All right, that's what he's talking about. Summer soldiers and sunshine patriots, fair weather fans, bandwagoners. Okay, we don't need them. Okay, those only people only show up when you win. They won't help you win. All right. Third sentence, I guess. "Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value." There's a lot of wisdom in that. The fact that something's rare is what gives it its value. That's why women want diamond rings, because diamonds are rare, and that's why they're valuable. Okay, no one wants to put like a piece of graphite on a ring because it's easily acquirable. The fact that it's rare, the fact that it's hard to get, is what makes it valuable. So he goes on to say, "Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial," that means heavenly, "an article as freedom," in all caps, "should not be highly rated. Britain, with an army to enforce her tyranny, has declared that she has a right not only to tax us, but to bind us in all cases whatsoever. And if being bound in that manner is not slavery, then there is not such a thing as slavery upon earth." I mean, except for actual slavery, which is, what a lot of his buddies are practicing. But again, the hypocrisy, we got to let it slide for now. The ideas he's talking about are solid. "Even the expression is impious, for so unlimited a power can belong only to God. And king, you're not God." That's his implication. "I have as little superstition in me as any man living, but my secret opinion has ever been, and still is, that God Almighty will not give up a people to military destruction, or leave them unsupportedly to perish, who have so earnestly and so repeatedly sought to avoid the calamities of war, by every decent method which wisdom could invent. Neither have I so much of the infidel," someone who doesn't hold religious beliefs, "in me, as to suppose that he has relinquished the government of the world, and given us up to the care of devils. And as I do not, I cannot see on what grounds the King of Britain can look up to heaven for help against us. A common murderer, a highwayman, or a housebreaker has as good a pretense as he." And you're seeing echoes from the Declaration of Independence here, saying that first of all, God's on our side. He won't let us lose. Second of all, we've patiently tried to reason with this guy and told him what's wrong, and he won't listen to us. And he's not acting like a king anymore. He's acting like a lawless criminal. Okay, just because he's the title of king doesn't mean he should be able to make up all the laws and change everything he wants, which he would say, "Hey, I'm the king. I can do whatever. Oh, I'm the king. I can do what I want." But Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson saying, no, that shouldn't be the way it is. All right. He's about to tell, and there's a question on the test about this, an anecdote to make his point. An anecdote is a story from your personal life that you think makes a point. So here's his anecdote. "I once felt all that kind of anger which a man ought to feel against the mean principles that are held by the Tories." The Tories are people who lived in America but didn't want to split. They supported England. "A noted one who kept a tavern at Amboy." So this guy owns a bar. "He was standing at his door with as pretty a child in his hand, about 8 or 9 years old, as ever I saw, and after speaking his mind as freely as he thought was prudent, finished with this unfatherly expression: Well, give me peace in my day. Not a man lives on the continent but fully believes that a separation must sometime or other finally take place. And a generous parent should have said, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace. And this single reflection, well applied, is sufficient to awaken every man to duty. Not a place upon earth might be so happy as America. Her situation is remote from all the wrangling world, and she has nothing to do but trade with them. A man can distinguish himself between temper and principle, and I am confident, and I am as confident as I am that God governs the world, that America will never be happy till she gets clear of foreign dominion. Wars without ceasing will break out till that period arrives, and the continent must in the end be conqueror. For though the flame of liberty may sometimes cease to shine, the coal can never expire. So he tells an anecdote, and he brilliantly follows it up with his point. Okay, the anecdote is, I know this guy who owns a bar, and he has an 8 or 9-year-old kid. And the guy says, I want peace in my day. I don't want to go to war. Let me have some peace. And Thomas Paine says, dude, you're a bad dad. You're a bad father. You're a freaking coward. Because everyone knows there's going to be a war between the two. We're not able to coexist across the ocean. It's just not ever going to happen. Okay, even if we quit right now, there would still be this coal burning for revolution. Okay, it's going to happen at some point. So if you're a good dad, if you are a brave dad, you'd say, let me fight the war. Let me make the sacrifice so that my kid, he can have a better life. Okay, that's brilliant persuasive writing, calling out parents, calling out dads. Like, you're a bad dad. Dads hate being called bad dads. I get it all the time. It's just mostly for my kids and my wife. I ignore. All right, next paragraph, last paragraph on 161. I turn with the warm ardor of a friend to those who have nobly stood and are yet determined to stand the matter out. I call not upon a few, but upon all. Not on this state or that state, but on every state. Up and help us. Lay your shoulders to the wheel. Better have too much force than too little when so great an object is at stake. Let it be told to the future world that in the depth of winter, when nothing but hope and virtue could survive, that the city and the country, alarmed at one common danger, came forth to meet and to repulse it. Say not that thousands are gone. Turn out your tens of thousands. Throw not the burden of the day upon Providence. Don't ask God for help. But show your faith by your works that God may bless you. Okay, don't wait for God. You do it. It matters not where you live or what rank of life you hold. The evil or the blessing will reach you all. The far and the near, the home counties and the back, the rich and the poor will suffer or rejoice alike. The heart that feels not now is dead. The blood of his children will curse his cowardice, who shrinks back at a time when a little might have saved the whole and made them happy. I love the man that can smile at trouble, that can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, but he whose heart is firm and whose conscience approves his conduct will pursue his principles unto death. My own line of reasoning is to myself as straight and as clear as a ray of light. Not all the treasures of the world, so far as I believe, could have induced me to support an offensive war, for I think that is murder. But if a thief breaks into my house, burns and destroys my property, and kills or threatens to kill me or those that are in it, and to bind me in all cases whatsoever to his absolute will, am I to suffer it? What signifies it to me? What does it matter to me whether he who does it is a king or a common man, my countryman or not my countryman, whether it be done by an individual villain or an army of them? If we reason to the root of things, we shall find no difference. Neither can any just cause be assigned why we should punish in the one case and pardon in the other. So I don't care if you're king. I don't care if you're an army. If you're doing stuff to me that's wrong and illegal and immoral and evil, it doesn't matter who you are. Okay, you're still burning my house down. I don't care if a king does it or a common guy does it. And that's the crisis. I'm fired up. All right. Now let's answer a few questions in class, and then I'll direct you to the test. Keep those books on you. Thanks a lot.